What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the team room. We got a great one for you this time. Talking the Pedro 6-6 crash, we brought on the team leader for that event, Doug Dicken. He is a long-time, now retired PJ that has a number of different things that he's moved on, and he's working a bunch of different things that are really, really interesting. But he talks specifically about the Pedro 6-6 incident in southern Afghanistan in 2010. So it was a big loss to the community, and Doug is kind enough to talk his way through it and talk about all the great things that happened during that tragic event and afterwards. So great episode with Doug Dicken. Awesome having him on. It was a real pleasure to talk to him and really work through some stuff. Doug is a longtime personal friend. He's been working at the schoolhouse. I think he worked there for about 10 years at the PJ schoolhouse before he ended up moving on to his current gig, which he talks about here. So we appreciate y'all sitting down with us and listening to this really, really big event in the rescue community and talking about some of our friends that we lost. So great one with Doug. We really appreciate it. What? No more clapping. What's up, everybody? Back in the team room here with Trent and myself. We have a special guest that's come on, longtime friend. I don't think you can say former PJ. I know you never say like former Marine, like once a Marine, always Marine, but you are who you are, Douglas Dicken. Welcome to the podcast. What's up, bud?
You got frozen there, man. I didn't hear anything.
I think that's over to you, Doug. I think he was like, he's like, Doug, introduce yourself. And we're just like, is he going to say something?
We're just sitting there. What's up, Doug? Tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Yeah, man. So I went into Pararescue back in 2003, went through Indoc and the whole pipeline. Took me about 2 years, 10 months. After that, I spent about maybe 5 years over at the 48th. Had a handful of deployments out to Afghanistan and over to Africa, and then I went from there over to Indoc. After Indoc, I separated. I jumped on the federal side over at the PJ school, and I spent about 6 years instructing over there with you, Aaron. And then after that, I took a leap and I jumped into the world of contracting. So I had some great people take a risk on a dumb soft guy, and I was able to, just kind of carve out, a new niche, reinvent myself, and get into the world of, program management, dealing with engineers, satellites, stuff like that. So, it's been pretty cool. I've been pretty fortunate.
Okay, can you talk about Indoc more like it's buds? I feel like we missed something because every SEAL that's on any podcast, like they have to talk about buds for like 30 minutes.
35 minutes of buds. Yeah, exactly.
I need more Indoc stories.
Oh, so yeah, man, I died like 9 times there, and
Well, that's a requirement. Yeah. You have to get drowned. Everybody knows that. That's the question number one. Like, do they drown you at Indoc? Yeah, of course they did. Come on, you guys didn't know that? And they can break small bones at SEER, but not big ones. Everybody knows that. I do want to talk about, you went through 2003 time frame. Like this was, it was a weird time, right? So I went through obviously, around the same time as you did back then. So I have a little bit of experience with that time as well. But it was a weird time, right? Because the instructors hadn't really seen the combat that people did see like later at like 2010, 2012. And then later on when you and I became instructors, every single instructor had multiple deployments. Every single instructor had combat time. A good amount of the instructors had, decorations and big missions behind them. So when you were going through that first Indoc, what was it like for you to be in that very, very, because we had just invaded Iraq. We had people in Afghanistan in 2002, 2003, but those people weren't your instructors. Like those instructors were people that were running you through and were trying to get you ready. What do you remember from going through the pipeline at that time?
Man, it was a kick in the face. I mean, regardless of their, combat experience, we had some instructors that really put the screws to us, and, true to the fashion of Indoc and, PJ's, running it back then. It was legit, man. I'm not here to scoff at anybody's combat experience. I mean, they were still good instructors for the cards that they were dealt. And it was, being an Indoc instructor myself and having even a larger cadre when I was an instructor, to look back and realize what they accomplished with the amount of instructors they had was, it was impressive to be real, man.
Well, yeah, and people don't put that together. Like back in the day, like back in these early Indoc periods, there were like 5 instructors.
Yeah.
there was like 5 line instructors, there was a commandant, there was a minimum staff of people, and then you were a debt of a larger, organization that had like 0 support. You were just on Medina Annex back then, and you were just kind of like jobbing it out, and you were just doing stuff. And that always amazes me when I got to be an instructor at Kirtland. I remember going through the pipeline and being like, man, they made magic out of lunch meat for an entire decade. And it was just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So got through the pipeline. Was your favorite part of the pipeline? Was it free fall? Was it just knowing you? It's probably going to be like being close with all those dudes, but whatever.
I mean, yeah, of course, free fall was fun, man. But I'd have to say, like, I enjoyed SEER the most. I went through perfect weather, man. It was around the October time frame, so snow wasn't hitting the ground yet. I mean, it was cool. I have the utmost respect for those SEER dudes up at Fairchild, and just the professionalism and the systems and processes they have in place to just run such a hell of a student load through there, and the quality of training was just outstanding. I felt very fortunate to be able to go through and have the instructors there, giving us some of that wisdom. So that was my favorite school, man.
Nice.
Man, you're being so nice about stuff. Like you bring up SEER school. I got to like reprogram my brain this morning, like, cause I just want to make fun of SEER guys, but like, I'll get over it. We'll move forward.
Oh, don't get me wrong. Too.
But you're like, oh, it's so professional, and I'm like, this is not going where I thought we were going to go when we started talking about SEER. But it is. So once you got on team, what was your favorite part about being? I don't know, like like we're moving forward to your career. I really want to get to the juicy stuff, but you get out of the pipeline, you get on team, and we talk about the pipeline and things that you need to glob onto as a student that's going to make you successful on team. Like, what were those big things that you learned? Beyond SEER school and their professionalism and all that stuff that helped you out once you got the team.
So, I mean, man, getting onto the teams, man, it's just a reset button. You got to realize that you're just another dude with a beret on the teams. And, what matters is how much you put out. Like people look from the outside and they see, all the badges and the ribbons, and they're like, oh, cool, PJ and all that kind of stuff. But man, once you get on teams, you look around the team room and you realize you're back at the bottom of the totem pole. And, you just gotta, like in CQC, just look for work, man. And, you've got to continuously prove your value and your worth. Otherwise you become, that guy on the team. So, and I mean, man, I've been in places where I'm that guy. I mean, I had a mentor, Mike Flores, ended up losing him in, a crash. But dude, he pulled me aside one time and he's like, hey, Doug, you're one of the senior airmen on the team. It's time for you to start stepping it up. And that was a huge come to Jesus for me. And I was like, man, if this is coming from Flo, like one of the chillest dudes on the planet, for real. That's truth. That's gospel. So, that was really a turning point in my life on the teams where, I really had to step up and, try to look for work even more and just, show guys that, I'm there to help, there to lead, there to follow, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, getting on the teams, man, it's a big reset button and you just got to work harder.
Was that the point where you realized it's more of a responsibility than like a look at me hat that was going on?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I always kind of knew, like, I would have to step it up more. I didn't feel like I was owed anything because I had a beret on or because I had different badges, but it was definitely that responsibility to the teams that, it's my responsibility if I have the knowledge or the capabilities and skills to give that back to the team and, really step up, even though I was an E4, as new E4s, back in the day, there was no E3s coming to the units. to take them out and train them. And, even though we're all the same rank, like I've done tree rescue more than they have. So I got to take them out and, do some of that work and just lean forward into it,
Yep.
Scheduling flights and, figuring out scenarios and all that kind of stuff, man.
I think that's one of the most important things about our community is like you're an E4 and you're supposed to like go out there and train folks and then set up flights and all these other things. Like we force our people to grow up so fast because I think that's pretty unusual for people. And then just the training aspect, like how weird is it training your peers when you look back at it now? Like you're like a 20-something-year-old dude. And it's like, oh, take these other 20-something-year-old dudes and go do tree rescue training and like make them better at it. Like, isn't that just sounds kind of insane to me now as like a 40-year-old dude looking back. But at the time, it was just like, oh, like I'm good at this stuff. Come on, guys. Like I'm going to go show you the ropes or, PJ ropes anyway.
Yeah, get it. No, I love it. Yeah, good pun, Trent.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, and man, those new guys, they hold you accountable because you have these new dudes coming to the unit that you were in the pipeline with, and maybe you got there 6 months to a year ahead of them, and so you have that familiarity where they know you from the pipeline, yet they will still call you out, and I still remember Brian Kane calling me out. He's like, Doug, I didn't understand one word you just said to me in that brief. You need to slow it down and like collect yourself. And I was like, dude, that was the best feedback I ever heard as like a young element lead. That, I was like, I really need to take the time to digest my own material so that, I can not just regurgitate it on them, but actually convey a message to the guys and lay out a plan. So that was another one of those things where the teams are full of brutal feedback, and they, in doing training for, guys that are the same rank, they're going to challenge you. And, it's your responsibility to accept that constructive criticism and make yourself better, because if you don't, then you're just going to fall behind in a major skill of being able to train guys and, bring up the next generation of dudes.
We have a couple things that we say to the, to the listeners or to people that want to get an ASPAC war, and we find like we're repeating ourselves. Like every time a guest comes on, we're like, oh, this is the thing that we say. But all the time we tell people like your reputation starts in the pipeline. Like you have to be like, it's not like when you get your beret, magically you're now a PJ and you know everything, or, a controller or SR or whatever. You magically know everything and it starts at graduation. No, it starts in the pipeline. You talking about all of these things that we harp on: attention to detail, doing things the right way the first time, being a professional at your craft, like understanding how to do your given duty. Because right away as an E4, you're teaching people high risk, high consequence skills right out of the pipeline. And oh, by the way, they know you from the pipeline. It's not like they don't know your name. They know who you are and what you're about. So thanks, Doug. Thanks for letting me get on my soapbox yet again and say and repeat some of these axioms that we put in there. Way to go, Doug. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, man. So you're at the 48th. You're getting there, and you're getting on that cycle. It was hot and heavy at that time. How long was it before you hit your first deployment?
Man, it took me a while. I mean, I watched the.
Oh, did it? Okay.
I watched guys deploy out the door, and man, that made me angry. I'm going to be real, because I was chomping at the bit and not knowing what I didn't know, which I know now, man. Be careful what you wish for, because I watched dudes roll out to Iraq, and I was working with the medical logistics NCO, and just trying to pack out all of their mass casualty, their high altitude medical kit, like all those things that they needed to be able to deploy. And I'm stuck back in the rear because I was still missing some, qualification items to be able to deploy. So,
right.
I'm stuck back there, kind of pretty pissed off and angry that I wasn't deploying with the boys, and I'm stuck at home. But, I got my first deployment over to Africa, and largely uneventful, very, very small team. Mm-hmm. It was like, 6 of us. And, Yeah, not a whole lot happened there, but you know, in '09 we got tapped with the Kazovac mission, and you know, the
Mm-hmm.
48th cleared house, and you know, we're at all the locations in Afghanistan and Iraq and even Hoa, Africa,
Yeah.
and that's when it got real busy, man. You know, we were
Yeah.
down in Helmand, you know, and at that time it was a great base to be on, man. It was, you know, us and the
Yeah.
Brits, and you know, even though Kazovac isn't necessarily, you know, the PJ mission everybody thinks about, and you know, whether you like it or not, that was the cards that we were dealt. So we're doing a lot out there.
And it just dawned on me. I don't think we've ever fully explained this, so I'm going to take a second here. So back in the day, pararescuemen and CROs were like, there's two ways to hold alert, everybody. You can either draw a box and you can say anything that happens inside of that box, we're going to go respond to, or you can say, hey, here's a team. They're going to go out. If they need us, they're going to call us, right? That's essentially the two ways without getting too into it. That's how we hold alert for things, right? So it's either over an area where there are things going on or for a specific team. So back in the day, we didn't used to fly to point of injury just to do Kazovac. But as GWAT in Iraq and Afghanistan got really, really intense, Dustoff could not handle it. Neither could the British team. So the British team had what were they called? The MERT?
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah, the medical response team. So the Brits had the MERT, and then there was Kazovac, so Army Dustoff. It got so busy, and they couldn't fly into areas where there were active firefights going on. Well, there were a bunch of PJs that were sitting around that were like, hey, guys, we have guns. We can fight. We can help. And that's how we got ourselves into the, no kidding, Kazovac mission. So when you hear PJs, especially from our era, talk about the Kazovac mission, that's what that was. Is we would, no kidding, you would share calls. So we'd be like, hey, here's the call that's coming up. These people need help. Is it a firefight? All right, PJs, you and the Air Force rescue helicopters are going to go in for this one. This is where the show Inside Combat Rescue, that's the entire focus of that show was really that Kazovac mission. It was a really, really small part of the mission set, but it got a lot of play because it looked cool, right? PJs riding in on helicopters to go get in gunfights and to save people that were injured and needed our assistance. And man, there was a lot of goodness that came out of it. And there was a lot of badness that came out of it too, and we'll talk about that as we go on. But yeah, the Bastion, Leatherneck, Shorebach area was extremely hot. So just to frame everybody, when we talk about Helmand Province at that time, we had teams come back from Vegas. So when we were in Vegas, we had teams come back. I won't say his name because he's at one of the North Carolina units now, but he came back and he had flown 242 missions during his time when he was there. No kidding. You would fly, you would drop somebody off at the actual spot, like at the HLZ, and you would get alerted right away. You would get another alert. You would just get gas and you would take right off from that HLZ, and you'd go right back into the Sangin, into the Helmand Province, into the valley down there. A bunch of just terrible areas. It was essentially the Wild West. And that brings us to you and Bastion. Was 2010 your first deployment to Bastion, or was 2009?
2009.
How was the 2009 deployment? Because it was ridiculous in 2009 in Helmand.
Dude, it was kind of cowboy country down there, man. It wasn't like what I've heard about like in 08, 07, but it was just us and the Brits, and it was pretty much a race to get whoever we could. Back in 09, the biggest hotspot was Marja, and Marja was just a shithole, and that's where they had all congregated. Like if you overflew Marja, you were getting hit with Dishka and RPGs. So largely we stayed away from Marja because we didn't have a whole lot of ground forces in there. But there was this constant pump fake going from U.S. military of, hey, we're going to push into Marja, and it never happened. Well, it did, but this gave the Al Qaeda, the Taliban, the time to kind of get out of Marja, which then between like 09 and 10, there was a major surge of the Marines. And by the way, I love my Marines out there because, you know, I've been there for you guys, but you guys have also saved my bacon too. Because, you guys fought hard.
Those dudes were getting it on. Bastion was a Marine base. Those guys would just, and old school patrol to contact. No kidding, the Marines would just be like, I'm like, hey, what are you guys doing today? They're like, oh, we're going to go do this patrol into the Sangin. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like it sucks. What are you looking for? They were like, oh, no, we're just going to wait for somebody to shoot at us. And we're going to go get into a gunfight. Yeah. Like, oh, word? Oh, okay. Tight E3, assistant gunner. Go have fun, I guess. And they're like, oh, yeah, no, we're totally going to just, we're going to go get into a gunfight.
Oh, dude. Okay. Yeah, like so many times I'd be on the ground.
Insane.
Like, I remember this one time. There were these two locals that were, you know, just off the tail rotor, maybe about 25 meters. They were pushing like a dirt bike towards the helicopter. And, you know, my bullshit meter got pegged. And I'm like, I looked at this one Marine. I was like, yo, dude, go take care of them. And this guy like turned into an NFL tight end. And this dude just pain trained these two guys over the motorcycle. And I am thinking that this motorcycle is loaded with explosives. And this Marine just
is a bomb.
Boom.
Right.
He just rolls in on these guys and just tackles them. And I'm like, okay, thanks, man. Yes. Like, I appreciate you. Like, you know, my meter was pegged all into the red, but then I'm laughing at the same time. Like, I see this dude just straight up lay these guys out, whether they were good or bad. I was like, well, I appreciate the comfort there. It means a lot.
Yeah. And it's such a weird thing too, because it's one of those things where it's so surreal to watch that happen. You can't do anything but laugh. Like, you're literally worried about I don't know what bed I'm supposed to use here. Motorcycle born V bed, MB bed. I don't care.
You're thinking way too hard, bro.
It's way too early in the morning. But you know, you're like, oh no, this is a serious danger. And then the Marine just tackles them. Like, you can't do anything but laugh in that scenario. Like, what else are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean, and those guys, they're disciplined. I mean, everybody, you know, has their interpretations of the Marines, but man, they're so well disciplined. You know, another time we're coming in, helicopters coming down, and you know, literally the tail rotor and the tail wheel are coming down on this Marine, and I had to tell that pilot, like, stop down and forward 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, clear down rear. And he's like, Doug, what was that? I was like, you were about to put the tail on a Marine, and that boy wasn't moving. He was holding security, and
he had a security sector.
Like,
yeah.
And I still remember the guy looks up at me and then goes back to holding security. I'm like, okay.
Yep, that's a helicopter, no threat.
Yeah. He's like, I am totally cool laying here. I was like, I love you. So let's not kill you.
Nice. All right, so you get out of Helmand the first time, you get home. You know, those years, you took a while to get to that first deployment in Africa, and then you got your first, you know, GWAT Afghanistan deployment out of the way. How much time did you have at home in between time 1 and time 2, or between really the next year?
Man, I'm trying to remember. Maybe 6 months.
Exactly. That's the answer that I was looking for. And this is another thing that I wanted to tell people. So when I was in Vegas, roughly, it was a little bit afterwards. So I was at the 321st while you were going through your time at DM, and then we went to Vegas. Man, the ops tempo at the rescue squadrons back then was ridiculous. Yeah. It was, you went on a 4-month deployment. Really, it ended up being 5 because you get there, you know, a week and a half early, and then there was always a little bit of wiggle room on the back end too of when you were supposed to leave. So really, it's a 5-month deployment. You took about a month off. You had about 4.5 months of training, and then you were right back out the door. You were legitimately, you know, Vegas, we joked that one troop was the Christmas troop because we deployed like clockwork September to February every single year for 4 years straight, to the point where my commander was like, so I hit my third one in a row, third Christmas in a row that we were gone. And I just told him, I was like, I don't know, 4 deployments and, you know, 3, because I got another, like an Africa deployment at the front end of Vegas as well. But I'm like, I don't know, you know, 4 deployments in really 3.5 years sounds pretty good over Christmas. And he's like, Aaron, I'm ordering you that you are not going to go on this 4th deployment. in 4 years out of here. But that was the ops tempo, and it's hard for people to understand that now. Looking at the way that we do it now, you have a lot more predictability. But back in those days, you were just grinding, and people were like, well, how'd you do it? Well, it's because you were with the game crew. Like we were doing, we called it hard crewing, but it was like you were on the same team. You deployed with that team, you got back, you trained with that team, but you were already trained. You just got back out of the game. All you have to do is knock the rust off a little bit during those 6 months, maybe go to a couple other courses, or, sometimes depending on what year it was, you'd have to re-up your paramedic, but then you were right back in it. And that brings us to 2010. You go straight back to Bastion. So you get out of Bastion, you have your 6 months at home, and here we are back at Bastion in 2010. Did that second one feel different when you got there?
Yeah, man. Like mentally, because of my first trip out there in 2009, like my headspace was it was a little janky, man. I'm gonna be real. Like I was pretty jaded. And, at that point, my concern was about, my boys on my helo and, the crew, because, we dodged a lot of bullets, literally the last deployment. So,
yeah.
I mean, I had brand new guys that were on my helo, and now I'm concerned about them. And then I got, my other boys, on the other helos that just had babies, and, I hadn't had my kids by then, but at that point, my concern was about the team. So I was, finger on the trigger, man. I was ready to shoot first, and,
right.
Just definitely, more keyed in on the area. Cause I mean, like you said, Aaron, a 4-month deployment turns into really a 5-month. So just having come back from there and watching the news and, seeing the intel on what's going on with Marja, all those turds got flushed out of Marja, and, then it created these, micro shitholes throughout, Nadia Ali and Sangin, and still in a little bit in Marja and Lashkargah, and just sprinkled throughout the Helmand River Valley. It wasn't one concentration. It was a bunch of different places that were heavily fortified. So, it was the same but different. So, getting back in there, it was different. We're getting lit up more. And for guys who don't know, like when you're sitting in a helicopter and you start hearing somebody, and you're flying and you start hearing somebody hitting the helicopter with a hammer, that's not a mechanic, that stowed away. That's some jackass that's shooting at you, and he's actually hitting the helicopter. So, those places that we were flying through, they got a lot, more hot and heavy. We had a bigger presence there. Even between 2009 and 10, lot larger U.S. military presence, and, still working with the British. We had, other special operations on that base that we were, talking with, supporting as well. So, yeah, I mean, it got wild.
It's a weird thing between like your first and second real combat deployment, right? Where your first one, everything's new and you're not really sure like what you should be worried about. Like you're kind of worried about everything in the beginning, but then like you have like that adrenal overload and you can't be worried about everything. But like the second time, I don't think you even realize it, but you get back in that situation again. And like you said, like you're so much more keyed in, you're so much more aware of everything that's going on. And then like the increase in responsibility, that's pretty trippy. Like did you have that anxiety before you even got over there, or did it just kind of hit you once you got back in country?
No, I guess I did have that anxiety. I still have a picture of, me and my wife on the C-17 before we lifted off, and she's all, ugly crying. But, it was one of those things, like in the back of my head, I was like, this is going to be the deployment where I bite it. And,
wow.
It was one of those real bad feelings where, cause that first deployment, I was a shit magnet. I felt like anything that could go wrong, I was there. Like I was on the crew with the team where things went sideways, with the PR missions that we were doing out there, the handful of them in conjunction with the Kazakh, I just felt like I was always in the middle of, some of those gunfights where we didn't have the upper hand. So, going back that second time, I had that feeling like, this is going to get real. And, I better be living in the red, not the black, like the entire time. So, my ability to pick guys, from like, half a click away that are, kind of doing some shady movement through a tree line, I'd communicate that to the guys, and, I'd hold on that tree line, because something was off. And I had an internal code word that I'd tell my guys. If I called, this code word, that meant, in Doug's brain, there was something off about the area, because I knew Helmand River Valley really well. So if I made that call, it was just to get everybody else up into the red and, let them know, like, hey, I'm seeing something that's not right.
Yeah. At the schoolhouse, you and I have talked about this a lot. It was great. Like I totally stole this from you, but that tactical momentum, having that team leader intuition, right? Like, you don't know why it is that you feel the way that you feel, but good team leaders have that intuition. They call it spidey sense, call it a bad feeling, call it tactical momentum. But unless you've been somewhere, in a gunfight where you don't have the upper hand, or unless you've been in a situation where you can feel that tactical momentum slipping away, man, I'm having a physical reaction to it right now. I can feel that pit of my stomach. Like, there are times that you look at the team and you're like, we got to go. We've got to get out of this place with what we came to do right now, because shit is about to go sideways. And that is I've totally stolen that from you and made people believe that's my thing. But I got it from you at the schoolhouse. So I appreciate you talking that out.
I find that hard to believe you learned anything from me. But I'll take it. Thanks, man.
All right.
Yeah.
I just remember that time. I think everybody kind of felt that about the country in general at the time. Because I remember before our 07 rotation, like, we'd been losing dudes, and like during the 7, 8, 9, 10 time frame, I remember having those same conversations with my teammates before we went out. We don't go as a team, but like, we'd be like, dude, I don't think everybody's coming back this time. And those are those weird conversations that I don't think we really talk about that much. But once you have that, once you've been over there and realize who is the shit magnet and who isn't, Doug, please don't deploy with me ever.
Doug, exactly.
That's why I got out.
But like, it's just one of those weird things. So like, you kind of felt something big coming is what I'm catching wind of, a big event that kind of went down, if you want to start getting into that.
Yeah, man. So I was, we're flying as Pedro 6.6 and 6.7, and I was on 6.7, and I had a phenomenal crew, man. I'm going to call those guys out right now. Broth, Bruce, Wally, Dave, those guys were pipe hitters, man. And, I love them for everything that they did as a crew. It definitely meant a lot, and they were squared away, and we were the trail bird. And then up in the lead bird, we had Dave Wisniewski and Tony Simone, Chris Aguilera, Dave Smith, Mike Flores was the PJ team lead. Joel Gentz was the team commander, and Ben White, he was a PJ team member on his first deployment. And so we've been jobbing out kind of like we did the last deployment. And, like I said, I thought I was going down, but it turned out it was them. They got hit, and, we're going into, pick up a British dude over at, by Fob Jackson, and that's over in Sangin, or was. And, I think it was our turn to go in, and I remember we're ripping over the desert from Bashan over to Sangin, and you kind of drop over this ledge or this cliff into the river valley, and then you got like a click of river to move across. And I mean, you can see the fob there, but like I said before, Sangin turned into that shithole, And, every time we'd gone in there, it got sporty, man. Like, we're getting shot at and, pulling guys out and getting lucky.
Yeah. Well, and people don't realize this too. Like taking off from Bastion, you would take off, and there was I can't remember what was that little Kalat. There was this one little village that was like northeast, and it was every single time we flew over that stupid Kalat, we would get shot at every single time. And it was like, hey, you want to fly high today? You want to fly low today? Do we which way do we want to go? Because you had to go essentially over this thing. So to frame everybody and what Doug's talking about is when you're flying in a two ship, there was a lot of times where you would sometimes lead would go in, sometimes trail would go in. And there's a big long algorithm that we use for what we do. So it's not just like, hey, a coin flip. It's my turn to go on the ground today. It's like, hey, who's the correct bird for this? And usually you have a plan as you're going in. So when Doug's talking about, I think it was our turn to go in. That's a conversation that the team is having between both the helicopters and the operators on the helicopter to say, hey, who's right for this one? What are we going to do? And in that moment, you guys were talking, and the call was made. 6-6 was going to go in and pick the Marina.
Yeah. So we drop down over that cliff. We rip over the water there, and I can remember this clear as day. I hear Broth up in the. He was my pilot. Love that dude. I hear him, over the radio. What the hell are they doing? Turn right, deconflict. And I was like, that's not a normal call. So
right
as we turn right, now we've got 6-6, ahead of us. We turn right. So I crawl across the cabin because I'm sitting right door. I crawl across the cabin and I see, I see 6-6 kind of canted. And I'm going, what the hell is that? And, as we continue our pattern coming around, now we go back to, exposing my right side. And, at that point, I saw 6-6 spinning. So, indicative of them losing tail rotor authority, meaning tail rotor's gone. Not knowing what the hell that meant, how it happened. I mean, so I see them spinning in, from, maybe 150, 200 feet. And, as we continue that, I see them impact. And, to Dave Wisniewski's credit, like some of the last actions that he ever did was to move his aircraft from impacting the fob. So rather than hitting the fob that was out there and, hitting a bunch of people and British troops, he impacts down into the wadi. So they drop down into the wadi, and, at that point, like it was almost panic mode, man. It was like disbelief, like immediate denial.
Yeah.
And I hear Broth and Bruce on the radio. They're trying to call, 6-6. I'm on the horn, trying to call, Joel and Ben and Flo. I'm getting nothing. Right. And I just remember, and I mean, Broth and Bruce, I think they just, gave me that ability to make the choice. But, everybody knew what the right answer was when, I think it was Broth goes, Doug, what do you want to do? I'm like, get us in there now. And like,
we're going in.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
And so it was one of those moments of, we don't know what we're going into, but we're going to die going into it, because whatever did this, it can't be good. So.
Right. And I want to pause here too, because we get a lot of questions and a lot of DMs, and, the one that we've gotten most recently is people are like, GWAD isn't there anymore, and I want to go get into these gunfights, and I want to go serve, the way that the generation did before me. Like, I hope you guys are hearing it from me and Doug when we're talking. No, you don't.
No, you don't.
Because in that moment, in that moment, when time stops and the music stops and everybody looks at you and something terrible has gone on. And Doug, I love that you said, it was near panic mode. When that thing happens, when the music stops, you are right up against the edge of sheer fucking panic.
Yeah.
And you have to be the one to go, all right, you got to take one step back from that ledge and go, all right, what are we doing? Hey, we're going in. I don't know what's going on down there, but this is the thing.
Yeah.
Let's go do it.
I mean, you know, to everybody watching, man, like, this shit isn't Call of Duty. This isn't some, you know, compilation hero video that you're seeing on there. You don't have background music going into this. It's dirt, it's gunpowder, it's fire, it's all the shit that, you know, a natural, you know, human response is to be afraid of. You know, you have stuff getting in your eyes. Like, you can play Call of Duty all you want and it's fun. And hey, man, I'm there with you. It is fun. It's a good way to decompress. But man, that shit ain't real life. I mean, real life is, you know, watching some of your best friends go down in a helicopter crash or watching them get shot in front of you. Man, it's not hitting the med kit and all of a sudden they're good. Like, you know, that shit gets real. So, you know, to all the guys out there that are wannabes, gonnabes, even operators, like, just careful what you wish for, man, because you wish for the wrong things. You're gonna get in that situation like me. And, you know, I would gladly roll back the clock and, you know, have done nothing my entire career to get those guys back, you know, and it sucks. It hurts, man. And it's taken me a long time to, you know, get past a lot of this, but, you know, so, I mean, you know, we get moving, towards the crash site, and, you know, again, to Broff and Bruce's credit, you know, they apologized profusely to me about this later. And I'm like, you guys made the absolute right call. They put us in, you know, about a couple 100 meters offset because, and I think that was instinctive. That's what I was expecting them to do. That's what they did because, you know, we've been to crashes before and we don't want to stir up a whole bunch of JP8 and fire. And all of a sudden, you know, that aircraft goes up in flames. And
fire tornado, like on top of everything else.
Yeah. I mean, that's the last thing I needed. So, you know, they pull us in, they drop down a couple 100 meters away, maybe. And, you know, I just remember thinking, you know, now we're in IED country with someone who just shot down this helicopter. And I look at Luke and Mark and I'm like, follow me. You know, if I blow up, just drag my stumps back to the helicopter and keep working. I mean, that was my mindset. I was fine with losing my legs as long as it wasn't like way above the knee. You know what I'm talking about, man? Like,
we're
because that's what everybody, that's what every dude that I picked up was asking me is like, hey, is my junk still there? I'm like, yeah. And, you know, if it wasn't, I'm like, you know, here comes the ketamine train. Like,
right. What an absolutely crazy thing for three grown men to talk about, where we all completely understand this. Imagine like telling this to somebody that doesn't like this is why we can't get together with normal people at dinner parties. Like this is real life, dude. Like,
no, that's why I love what you guys are doing.
Like we can talk about it now and like, but whatever. I've 100%, you know, pick patients up and they're just like, I do not care about my missing legs. Is my junk intact? And we're like, okay, I've literally had patients go, oh, thank God. Okay, we're good. All right, let's go.
Yeah, that is 100% fact.
Like, what an insane thing.
I had the, oh, thank God. And, you know, the amount of junk I've checked, you know, to look out for a brother out there on the battlefield, you know, it's like, yeah, man, it's okay. And oh, thank God is the response I get. If, you know, I see more than obviously, man, they're in a bad shape. When it gets up into that Anguino area, like we've got bigger concerns than that. Yeah. And, you know, been there, done that. But yeah. So I mean, the whole thing was, you know, let's get off the bird. You know, there's trash mounds everywhere for whatever reason down in this wadi. And you know, Luke and Mark, they take up a position on a trash mound. I was like, I got to go check out this bird. And I mean, man, I'm 6'3". And I mean, that helicopter was now about head high. So, I mean, that thing kind of pancaked down. So, you know, I get up to that bird and, you know, I remember seeing about that much space, maybe about a foot between the ceiling and the floor of the cabin. And I'm like, oh shit. I was like, the boys are gone. And so I move up to the gunner window where Aggie was, and I didn't see anything there because I look up and I see Dave, the pilot. He was actually sitting on the left side because he was training Tony to take flight lead. And I get up there, and I won't go too deep into this, man, because I might lose my shit. But the rotors had slapped down, as the impact happened, and took off a good portion of the cockpit, and that hit Dave. When I saw Captain Wisniewski, I was Dave. It's like, fuck, and I'm trying to undo his seat, trying to get him out. Then I see movement come from the gunner window, and the indestructible monster back there, Aggie. He's still alive.
Aggie. Yeah.
I mean, you know, dude's a beast, and he is
hardest dude ever.
Oh my God, man. And I'm like, okay, I've got to focus on the dude who's moving, because we might get one out alive. And that's what I radioed back. I was, because mind you, my Helo 6-7, they took off, and so they're moving around in patterns over the river, and they have their own stuff going on, man. Like they're dealing with people shooting at them while they're trying to maintain solid comms with me,
protect you guys on the and protect you guys on the ground. That's why they take off. The helicopter's no good on the ground. They need to be providing you with fires overhead.
Yeah. So they have this overhead picture they're trying to maintain, because this happened like that. And yes, when a PR event, which this was, happens, the beehive gets smacked, dude. Like you want to piss off the U.S. military. This is the ramification of it. You get to see a bunch of fast moving airplanes and gunships come in, and they're about to track your ass and just vaporize you. So that's the comfort that we have. But at this point, we didn't have it yet, man. Like the aircraft is still getting diverted onto our location. So, and which happens insanely fast.
Right.
The quickness in which I had gunships overhead and then an entire stack was absolutely mind blowing. So we have that going on. I see Aggie moving back there, and so I go back to him, and I still remember this clear as day. Like the dude was messed up. Like I could tell his jaw was broken, because how he had impacted what his job was when they lost tail rotor authority was to almost stand up and lean outside of the window to spot a landing site so that the helicopter could auto rotate and continue to move in and maintain forward airspeed, which would keep the tail stable. Now, whatever, if the pilots out there want to correct me, fine. Like I don't give a shit. Like I'm not a pilot. I was sitting in the back. So to my knowledge, that's how auto rotation takes place. And helicopters in and of themselves are a matter of Harry Potter magic. So I barely understand.
They're not supposed to be able to fly.
Yeah, somehow.
Yeah, they're just so ugly. The earth repels them. Yeah.
So, Aggie's, body was looking out of this window. So when he hit Earth, he got slammed down onto this ledge where his gun was. I think he probably hit his face on his own 50 cal, and then he was kind of slumped down into the helicopter, which is why I didn't see him the first time, or maybe I was combat blind. I don't know, man.
Right.
But I get to him and I look in there. I was like, hey, dude, like, I don't know what I said. And he's like, yeah, just my legs are on fire, man. And I'm just blown away he's alive. But then in the way that he told me he's on fire, I'm just, oh shit, this is priority number one.
Yeah. And for everybody out there, that's not a euphemism.
Yeah.
Aggie was currently engulfed in flames. Yeah. Like that's a real thing.
And so I look back into the cabin, and sure enough, like I see, that JP-8 fire, and it's shit out of a nightmare, man. Like when you see that fire roiling in the back, like, now I know I have leaking JP-8 inside the cabin with, it ignited. And here my brother is telling me, he's on fire, just in the way that we're talking right now. So I was like, all right, bro. And at that point, the Brits were just coming out like army ants, dude. Like they're sending out their
Right.
jackals and, all their armored trucks to help us secure the area. And so like the first trucks I see, I see fire extinguishers and water. And so I run over to them. I bang on the guys. I was like, yo, get every fire extinguisher, every jug of water that you have, take it to the left window of this helicopter and put the fire out. It's burning my guy. And so they start working on that. And, in around that time, well, actually, I'll back up a little bit. This is kind of messed up, and it kind of screwed up my head for a while. When I first approached the aircraft, I thought I heard screaming, and that kind of messed me up big time. But then, and here's the biggest takeaway that I'm trying to drive this home is you boys got to talk, after action, this stuff, you got to talk about it. You're going to have those shitty moments where you lose your mind and, you got the salty tears coming out, but man, talk about it, because what I found out was Lucas was screaming at me because an Afghani police gun truck had pulled up on like this kind of bridge that went over the Wadi, and they're looking at us with their dishka pointing this way. So he's got selector on fire and he's about to smoke A&P guys, which, I'm sorry, man, but sometimes with those dudes, you never knew,
You didn't. Yeah. There were so many green on blues that happened. Every deployment, there was a green on blue.
Yeah. And thank God, man. Lucas was trying to scream at me, and he's taking up slack on the trigger. He's about to smoke this A&P dude, and the guy turns the gun away. And it was like, oh, okay. So, the reason for saying that is I wouldn't have known if I hadn't had those moments back in the team room with the boys, like really discussing this and having those emotional conversations.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I learned that for a couple of years afterward. So, to hear that was kind of funny, kind of nice, and really sad. But
all at once.
It kind of painted that picture of like, okay, like my brain isn't completely destroyed here from hearing that. It was him trying to cover my ass and, make sure I didn't get smoked by, some, 14 millimeter dishka or whatever it was. But,
oh my God.
Yeah. So anyways, the Brit dudes come out and, they start just, they start hitting Aggie himself, like with the fire extinguishers. I was like, no, hit the fire, man. Like put the fire out. Like this is like,
oh, guys,
son of a bitch. And so they start.
Aggie's like, yay, help is here. And then he's just like,
yeah. We're here to help you guys. Come on, quit it.
It's like that dog at the end of a fire hose going warble garble. So, but anyways, man, they start blasting him the right way and keeping the fire off, and it kind of dawns on me. I'm like, dude, I'm the team leader. I'm the team commander now, and now it's time for me to step up. Like I've got to figure out how to take control of this situation. So, I got Mark and Lucas. Mark, I'm like, yo, dude. Let's start ripping this helicopter apart. Get Aggie out. Lucas, treat. Like you lead the medical treatment. And in that, I realize in that kind of combat panic that I mentioned earlier, I didn't bring anything off the helicopter. Nothing.
Oh, wow.
Like Mark, because it was just so like, got to get there, got to do something. I brought nothing off the helicopter except my kit, my gun. I mean, that was it, dude. So, I mean, I have blowout kits on me, which that can sustain me for a time, but I need legit medical gear, legit extrication. So,
you need heavy extrication. You need, man, everything.
Yeah. So I have to call 6-7. I was like, yo, boys, I need you to come back into the zone. I need to get gear off. And so no hesitation, man, they were there in 30 seconds. They come back into a known shoot down site. And, you know, I run over the bird. I get this other dude to help me. And I just start cutting A3 bag handles and like cutting straps that were hanging our rucks, like all the daisy chains. And I'm basically just supermarket sweeping the helicopter, ripping all this stuff out and just, you know, dump it on the ground and, you know, as fast as I can get those guys to take off again. So now we have a whole bunch of gear. At my stupidity, you know, had to risk them coming back in because I didn't think clearly in the beginning. So, you know, that's one of those things.
And it can always get worse. It can always get worse, everybody. You know what's worse than one helicopter that got shot down? Both helicopters getting shot down. So it's like, make no mistake. Yeah, exactly. Make no mistake. This is not the worst case scenario. So that's, you know, that was definitely going through your head as you were pulling that stuff off the helicopter.
Yeah.
Well, it's easy to sit back here and be like, oh, you made a huge mistake. You didn't pull all of that gear off. But like for anybody that's ever been in like a situation where things get really serious, like I don't think anybody's going to judge you for that. You know what I mean? Like you wanted to get there, and like that balance between your training, your emotions, and your logical thoughts and all those other things that you have to like take into account in that moment. You know, like maybe speed was more important. Maybe you did make the right choice. Like we don't know. Like, but you ran into that point where you're like, oh, I need this stuff now. I just want to say, if anybody leaves a comment trying to judge you about this, I might get upset.
It's all good. I think nope. I don't have any feelings left.
Yeah.
All right. So I mean, moving on from that, you know, we start trying to take control of the situation. You know, I got the bird back out of there. We've got the medical gear, the extrication gear. More Brits are flowing out of the FOB. A Marine, group of Marines saw the crash from like a mile away and just hoofed it right to us, like dropped their mission and just got on target about as fast as, you know, some of the Brits did. So all of a sudden I'm seeing Marpat and, you know, British uniforms. I'm like, where the hell did you guys come from? They're like, about a mile over
They just
there.
Materialized out of the desert.
Like, yeah. It's like the sand people. They just popped up and all of a sudden, like, I'm surrounded by good guys. So I'm like, this is amazing.
Right.
Yeah. So, you know, seeing some of my US boys there was, you know, a huge comfort. So, you know, this one Navy corpsman, he starts, helping out Lucas, and, you know, some of the guys had already gotten the pilot Dave out of the helicopter, and due to the nature of his injury, he had trismus, or a head injury, which means his jaw is just wired shut. You know, not wired shut, but you know, that physiological response.
Right.
So they're trying to do a crike, and it wasn't going all that well. So, you know, I'm like, Luke, take over, like get a stranglehold on this. And you know, I realized, you know, I'm talking with 6-7. I was like, hey guys, I don't have the ROS freak in my radio. And I was like, pass the ROS freak. So, you know, they passed me that frequency, and I'm asking the British team, like, hey, where's your JTAC? And they tell me the JTAC's still in the FOB. I'm like, kind of need the JTAC here. I would really like the JTAC here.
Thanks for showing up. Could have helped.
I mean, it would help us collab, you know, man. Like, you know, we could kind of figure out where bad guys are and maybe control these air assets a little better. But the dude wasn't there, and the Brits hear me talking on the radio. You know, after I had figured out how to reprogram my radio, I overwrite a freak, and you know, in the middle of all of this, which felt like it took me 2 hours, but I was, I reprogrammed one of my frequencies to be able to talk over the ROS freak. And I'm not hearing anybody else talk except for me and a bunch of the aircraft that were in the overhead. So, I'm asking the Brit commander, like, dude, where's your JTAC? We need him here. And he's like, he's not coming out of the fob. So I was kind of miffed, to say the least.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then when the Brits start referring to me as the JTAC, I'm like, oh boy, I can't tell you how many times I said I am non-JTAC qualified to the aircraft in the overhead, because I didn't want there to be any misconception that I'm, a TAC P or a controller or anybody who's JTAC qualified. So, I'm down there talking to the gunships and, working with the British Ground Force commander and trying to figure out where guys are probing our security. Meanwhile, Mark is ripping apart the helicopter like only Mark can, just shredding that thing. He finally gets Aggie out, and, get Aggie out. We get Tony out. Tony had looked fine, but he was hurt. He had a severe TBI from probably impacting the stick as he came down, and Wisniewski. And we get all of them out. Meanwhile, I'm relaying this over to 6-7. I was like, hey, we got 1 out, 1 alive, 2 out, 3 out. Well, actually, no, we had 2 out. I call in 6-7 thinking that was it. And so 6-7 comes in. I was like, Lucas, I need you to go with him. And, he wanted to stay on the ground, but I was like, dude, you're the best medic on the team. Like, I need you to go with him. I'm sorry, but you got to go. Like, you're their best chance. I don't know if I said all that dramatic shit, but I mean, that's the way I felt. And that's the way I still feel about him.
Right.
And so he just Rogers up, and that Marine Corpsman goes with him. And, I love that guy for that. Because I had asked a Brit guy, I was like, hey, you're a medic, right? He's like, yeah. I was like, I need you to go with my boy and help him get these guys back to Bashan. And he's like, I can't. And right when he said I can't, I was about to, lay him out. It was just one of those responses, like, I'm going to knock you out and have,
what do you mean
have
you can't?
one less problem to deal with, because I don't live by I can't. Well, yeah, that Navy corpsman he's like, I'm going. I was like, Roger, thanks.
Nice.
So
thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, he and Lucas kept those guys alive. All 3 of them were alive the whole way. Lucas could probably tell the whole medical intricacies of maintaining 3 patients and bagging, 2 guys with crikes, 1 on a vent, 1 on a bag, dealing with Aggie, who shouldn't be alive, but the guy's an absolute monster. I still to this day, I don't know how he handled that. It's still an absolute miracle. So that left Mark and I on the ground, and, things kind of died down from there. Still talking with the gunships, dealing with, these guys that are trying to, probe our security, whether they're, coming to take pictures or coming to start a fight. We had a bunch of Brit, we also had A&A sprinkled into the security perimeter, and we had the Marines. So I felt good, at least that I had the Marines and the Brits.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Mark and I just sit on the ground and, deal with the, some of the munitions of the helicopter start cooking off. We got Ben. I identified him by just seeing his last 2, greater love hath no man than this, to lay down his life for his friends. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that's Ben. And we get Ben taken care of. And, then I'm like talking to the platforms, like, the gunships and the overhead. I was like, yo, look, I need somebody to relay back to Bash and talk, like, what's going on. I was like, all right, so here's the deal. We've done XYZ. We need to, kind of button things up here, or, stay in play. Like, what does my commander want? I asked for my commander's intent to be relayed over the radio. And so, yeah, the first thing I get back is that they're going to send, I think it was one of the Mert birds, the 47s, to come pick us up. And I was like, confirm you're going to send a 47 into a known shoot down site. So silence.
Yeah, probably not a good idea.
Silence, like by a minute. And then, okay, yeah, we're going to have, another air asset come in and lift us out. I was like, confirm you are going to send another aircraft into a known shoot down site. And so at that point, somebody did some deconfliction. And I guess I got my wish. I really should have thought about this a little bit more. We had a QRF come out of Nole and, open top Jackal, British vehicle. I'm like, the one that ejects everybody out if you're blown up.
If you hit an ID.
Yeah. So that became the extraction. And we load up, the guys that we lost, and, we get into these Jackal vehicles, and, I remember getting in and I see this, young British girl who can, the top of the Jackal vehicle, like when you're sitting there, it's like that, and I can barely see over there. So I'm propping my gun up, and then this girl who's like 4 foot nothing is like sitting next to me and just like totally protected. Like the shelf is right there. And I'm like, okay, guess she's done this before, but her gun's sitting, out of arm's reach. And I'm kind of like, okay. Jeez. So, we rip out of Sangin, we get down to Nole and, have to wait for nightfall, and my boys come and pick us up. So, that they had their own experience back at the talk because they wanted to come out and help. And they were fighting that hard fight. And for those of them, like, I wouldn't have wanted you to come in there, because you would have had to come in on a helicopter, and I wasn't about to have any more helicopters come in and get shot down and create more of an ass pain and emotional moment for me. And yeah, so I mean, being real, dude, like that, I wanted nothing more than to quit right then and there. I wanted to quit everything, curl up into a ball, and just fucking sob. And it sucked. But, I guess the career field bred that out of me. I knew that I couldn't. I didn't have that luxury. I really wanted just someone to come in and take care of everything, that had a level head, that, wouldn't talk to, didn't have that relationship with Flo where, we talked about surfing every day, or talking with Joel about the benefits versus hey-ho versus halo. And I don't care about docking. Like, we should be training to a hey-ho standard, like closing six on a combat equipment jump doesn't mean anything. And he's like, oh no, it's cool. Like those types of things start rolling through your head, where like these guys were just cut short, and wanting somebody to come in and save you. But your job is to bring calm to chaos. And, you got to realize that is, why we were created as PJs. And, when those things happen and you stick around long enough, they will. You've got to maintain that level head. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that was,
and I was pretty good friends with everybody, the entire crew. So there's actually a Vegas crew. The helicopters were Vegas crews on a DM rotation. Wiz, and everybody in that helicopter actually took me through my entire element leader upgrade. So the entire 40 hours of flying that I had to do just for the flying portion of my element leader upgrade, that was my crew. So there we were in North Carolina, like while this is going on downrange, I was over in North Carolina getting ready to go on a torch rotation. So we were getting spun up, getting ready to go. And we got word, no kidding, like 2 days before we deployed, this whole thing happened. So the word, spread through the career field, and, heard that it was, Ben and Flo and Joel, and then heard that it was the crew that it was. And man, it hit the community pretty hard, man. And we all felt like your boys at the talk.
Yeah.
I was in I guess the best of a worst possible situation, because we were just about to go downrange. Like we were just about to be like, okay, well, we're going to go get it on. Like at least we had that. And, the community took this one on the chin pretty hard because these guys were loved. I went through my entire pipeline with Ben White, my favorite Ben White story. So we're, my favorite Ben White story, two of them actually, is we were going through psychological training. They used to have pet training at Indoc, if you remember. And the psychological training at Indoc, we're sitting there, and the doc at the time looks at our Indoc class and goes, hey, you just got to talk yourself through it. You got to have positive self-talk. When you think that you're going to fail or you think that you're going to quit, you just got to tell yourself you're not. And Ben White, who's from Tennessee, raises his hand and goes, Doc, is it okay to lie to yourself like that? Because I know I'm not going to make it. we laugh like idiots. And then my absolute favorite Ben White story of all time. Ben, we're there, and there's a guy. His last name starts with a Z, right? So I'll just call him Z for this story. So he had failed the 5-mile run. For those of you that don't remember, the 5-mile run, you had to run every single run on a 7-minute mile, no matter what, except for the 6-mile run. And you can't fail two things in a row, right? So if you're going to fail any run, you fail the 5-mile run, and then you get a break. You can run the 6-mile run was at like a 7:30 pace, right? So you just, whatever you do, you cannot fail that 4-mile run. You have to pass the 4-mile run. Well, the Z, he failed the 4-mile run, which means he had to pass the 5-mile run. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. It's a little bit cold in Texas because I went through an Indoc's winter class because I'm harder than you. And obviously, and so there we are. It's a little bit cold, and we're about to go. It's Monday morning. We're about to go take this run, and this guy Z is kind of worried. And out walks Ben White out of the dorms. And he walks, like he's just smiling and walking over, and he bends down at the waist and he goes, oh, what's up, Z's legs? Do you wish you were Ben White's legs so you'd pass his eval? I bet you do. It was hilarious. We laughed like idiots about this. It's one of the crystal clear. I don't remember a whole lot of things from the pipeline. I remember that story like it's crystal clear. And by the way, that guy Z did not make that run. So he failed, and we're like, Ben, you cursed that guy. And he's like, oh, well, he wished he had my legs that day, I guess. And he just went on. It was absolutely fantastic.
I love how you make Ben sound like Mr. Herbert off Family Guy, like he's some pedophile from Kentucky.
oh, hey,
everybody.
Oh, hey, I know.
Y'all want to come to my van and eat candy?
We would say that, like we would talk like that in the Ben White voice, and he'd be like, "I don't sound like that," and then we'd all go, "No, you totally sound. It's exact." I thought I was talking.
Yeah,
right.
No, Ben has got to be the easiest guy to impersonate. And oh my god, dude, his antics were just—it's a riot. The guy would steal cases of Dr. Pepper and then put them in with all the narcotics in the fridge, so that nobody else would go to him because he was like the medical guy.
Yeah,
and everybody's like, "Where do all the Dr. Peppers going?" And there they are. So, somebody found them in the narcs fridge. And I'm like, God, dude.
Golly.
Yeah, man.
Oh, man. So after that, man, like after that heavy thing, man, you rotate home and you start learning a lot of lessons. And you kind of alluded to it before. You started learning a lot of lessons about reaching out for help and talking to your boys and working through this. Because while this event may have been, 16 hours, 24 hours from start to finish, like, now you're dealing with the very real aftermath of this event.
Yeah.
While I got to go down range and I got to go process this the way that we do, which is going and doing the mission. You had to engage in an entirely different fight.
Yeah. So
from a mental health aspect, from a talk to your boys aspect, man, I know that this is something that you're passionate about because you've worked so long to get to a good place with it. What kind of advice or what would you say to people dealing with these sort of events?
I would say my saving grace was, being able to talk about it. My wife, letting her know, like, as much as I can to kind of, bring her in, I'm not trying to offload the pain on her, but, let her understand like what actually happened because, dude, I remember there's like right after I got back, it was like around Christmas or something. And I just like collapsed inside my closet and Nicole wasn't there. And then, her spidey sense went off and just, held me in that closet there. And, let me get it out. But not only, you know, her, which, you know, I credit her with saving my life, man, because I don't know if I'd be here without her, just from how, you know, bad that got. But, you know, also, you know, credit to my boys that looked out for me, my mentors, you know, Coletti, AK, Pfeiffer, Dave Swan, like these dudes, like they would let me talk about it. And, you know, I'd be in their office, you know, closed door, just getting it out, man. Like grown man sobbing, ugly crying, dude. Just because, I mean, this stuff is hard to deal with. And, you know, them telling me their situations that they went through, like, you know, Roberts Ridge. And I still remember AK clear as day. Like, Doug, you know, don't go to the bottle over this one. He's like, I've done it. And, you know, I want to thank him, you know, specifically for that, because I remember there was a time where I had grabbed a bottle of vodka, and I mean, it was chugging time. And, you know, his words came back into my head, and I was like, no, this ain't the right way. I got to put this thing down. But yeah, man, being in the team room, being able to get over the grief by talking to some of the guys, but then also, you know, giving them those lessons learned. Like, what I screwed up does not have to transfer onto you. Like, I owe, you know, both of you guys, I owe you guys, like, you know, the feedback from what I experienced. So you don't forget, you know, your gear on the helicopter, or, you know, you transition to the right freak, or you realize that the antenna, dude, I had to stand out there like Harry Potter holding my antenna, because I had that old antenna relocator piece of shit that went to my back.
And you couldn't talk because it was on your back, and you couldn't talk to anybody. So I was sitting out there like Harry Potter holding my antenna, and I had to have Mark cut it off my back. And I'm holding this thing like, you know, out there trying to get comms, because anytime I talked with the birds, I'd have to like angle my back and, you know, get it pointed in the right direction. Otherwise, I was black on comms. So, but getting that stuff across after I got through the grief, it's like I owe, you know, everybody like lessons learned, and there's no glory in this story, man. Like whatsoever. It's something I wish never happened in my life. But that being said, you know, let's give this feedback to other guys. Like, tell guys my mistakes, like what went wrong. You know, the boys out there, they did a lot of things right. You know, I had my hiccups, and, you know, I owe them so much for what they were able to do. So, yeah, I mean, getting through that, like, you know, the first year, you know, I'm sorry, man, but talking to psych docs didn't help me. It was the bros. Like, being in the team room, being able to actually, you know, let loose, be vulnerable, and talk to the guys, and, you know, get through it that way. That's what, you know, saved my life. You know, but, you know, I had hit burnout, and I mean, I still had another deployment to do. I mean, thanks to Jason, and, you know, those guys, you know, they put me on a HOA deployment where, you know, again, I still got tapped with the PR missions, like anyone that was out there, like, hey, this predator just splashed. Oh, great. Doug, you go. I'm like, oh, great. Here. Oh, tight. Here we go.
Sweet. That's what I want to do. I want to go try and find a predator that sank last night. This is going to be good.
In the Gulf of Aden. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Well, I think the psych doc thing is weird, because like when you're talking to a psych doc and you're like, hey, I was going through this, and if they're like lean in, they're like, well, why did you feel that way? You know, like, or they ask one of those like stupid questions. You're like, my bros know. And I don't know, like I'm a huge proponent of like the bro team room psych environment, especially for like the big things. But I just want to point that out. Like, no offense to the psych docs, but like if you haven't been there, if you haven't experienced these things, if you haven't gone through the same training, if you don't process things the same way that we do, like, you're just not going to understand. Like, well, why were you laughing in this moment, and then like you wanted everything to go away the next moment? You know, like, it makes sense when you tell the story, but like, I'm over here getting chills. I'm sorry. I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah.
Trent, he gets really excited.
I get excited.
It's one of my favorite things about Trent.
Dude, I got love for the psych docs. Yeah, same thing, man. Like, don't get me wrong, but I'm just telling you, there's something about being able to talk to one of the brothers that's been there, done that. And I know, with Jolly, like those boys went through some hell too. Like Annie, even all the stuff in training, like just getting, this is coming on the coattails of Harry, Harry's memorial was, just on Friday. I mean, dude,
right.
It hurts. And here's one of our problems. Anytime, how many times are you have guys raised their hand and said, I need help?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Zero.
So
we have these heart to hearts at these memorials, and we get together, and the whole career field shows up. It made my heart so happy to see how many hundreds of PJs down for that memorial. But you know what? Those guys went home, and there's a bunch of guys in that crowd that need help right now, and they won't text their bro to go, hey man, I'm messed up. I need help. I need you to come help me out. Man, I don't know how do we fix it?
We fix it by reaching out. When it's like CQC. It's like a mask has. Your head's on a swivel. You're looking for work, right? You don't ask, hey, do you need help? You go help. And man, I'm a shitty communicator. I really wish I did better at reaching out to the brothers and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes I just kind of stay in my own zone, but it's not about the guys reaching out for help. It's us reaching in like, hey, I'm coming. It's not, hey, who needs help? No, because nobody's going to raise their hand.
Right.
I promise you, guys are not going to sit there and say, I need help. It's up to us to see that stuff coming, because if we've been there and we can identify some of those things, we know, those character traits or those attributes that a guy is going to exhibit, like, pulling himself away from his peers, or, getting into, self-destructive habits, things, dude, like substance abuse, stuff like that. Like they just go down these dark holes, man. It kills me. And, that's where it is. It's not on these guys. It's not their responsibility to raise their hand and get help. It's our responsibility to identify it and pull them aside and be like, hey bro, come here. Like, let's close the door. Let's have a real talk, because, it's happening way too damn much, man. And it kills me to see.
Yeah, that's right.
And go ahead, Trent.
I'm sorry. I think one of the big things is just giving people the space to tell their story and like to open up about stuff. And, you know what I mean? Like, and selfishly, like I look at this podcast and like people like you come on and tell your story. And like, I can't help but think that this is also therapeutic for me. Like this helps me listening to you talk about your story and getting to know all these people and coming on here every week and talking to folks. But like, if you're in a leadership position, like you just need to sit down with your folks, like, and give them the space to talk, like it's not always like, hey, you need help. Like, so like you need to go to whatever. Yeah. Like, I think just like sharing is like the huge, big first step. And that's what you miss out of the team room, right? When you leave. And that's what makes it really hard. Like you go home, you're not in the team room, like you up to staff or you go to these different places, you're not in the team room anymore. But yeah, if I was going to give advice to anybody out there, which I'm not trying to give advice to people really right now, but like just give people space to talk, and it'll probably help you as much as it helps them if you guys have like similar stories.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We got to do better.
Damn right, Doug. And we're going to do it together. We got to get you back on, bro.
All right.
This is this is a heavy one, but this is important. Like we need to have you back on and talk about some other stuff, because I definitely want to talk about how the career field's evolved and some other stuff that we're looking at. But man, I just want to end with a thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on and being vulnerable and telling the story. And man, we're gonna get you back on for a part 2. So I'm gonna hit you up with the question that we ask all of our guests. So there are people out there right now that are on the fence, or they don't know if they want to try to do this crazy thing, being a PJ or a TAC P or a controller. What advice would you give to those people that are trying to decide if they want to do this thing or not?
don't listen to anybody who tells you that you can't do it. Don't listen to anybody who tells you the odds. Dude, if I made it through, you can make it through. I was nothing amazing. I failed my first Indoc team. I could barely do pull-ups. But, I mean, honestly, I shouldn't have been a PJ because, you know, I failed pull-ups. But I was given this unique chance to still get through. So, you know, I had that cloud looming over me that I've got to try and be better and better. But do not listen to anybody who tells you not to, because I'm going to tell you not to. Don't do it. If I can tell you not to, and I can tell you all the negative shit about this job and you still want to do it, then that's what we're looking for. But if you listen to the people who, you know, tell you you can't do it, then you know what? It's not the right thing. And that's fine. I've seen a lot of guys come to Indoc that, you know, that they listened to other people, listened to their perspective and, you know, of you can't make it. And then they collapse. You've got to have that resilience to tell yourself, I can't do this. If Aaron, Doug, and Trent made it through, God, I can.
Yep.
That's true.
That's facts. That's facts. Man, Doug, can't say thanks enough again. You know, everybody knows where to find us. So like, subscribe, do that whole thing. I just want to end on this one, you know, to you know, Captain Dave Wisniewski, to Wiz, to Joel, to Flo, to David Smith, to Flores, you know, Flo, to Ben White, you know, to Joel, Gentz. Man, we miss you. We love you. You know, Aggie, Cap Simone, still in the fight to this day.
Yep.
We miss you. We miss you every day that you're not with us, but you guys are grinding in your own way. And Aggie, the indestructible monster that he is out there doing great things, and Cap Simone is too. So, man, to everybody that was involved in this one and everybody that kind of builds out from those circles, like, man, this thing is it was important for us to tell this story and to get it out there. And Doug, we just want to say thanks, man. We really appreciate you. So for everybody else, thanks for coming on. Doug, we'll get you on for a part 2. Everybody else, we'll see you later. Train hard.
Later.